Hello and welcome to another episode of the GCSUNScast, the longest running Suns show on the interwebs. I'm your host Shane, and before we get into tonight's show, which is going to be a big show, and before I welcome tonight's special guest, I want to thank our Patreon sponsors: Dale Snelling, Paul Vosti, Robbie Fiorini, Brody Burgess, Kate Kelland, Tom Kim and Tim. Thank you guys so much for your Patreon support. You can join our Patreon sponsors at patreon.com/GCSUNScast. Donate there and help the GCSUNScast. You can also like and subscribe, review the show over at YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Spotify, wherever you like to get your podcasts from. But enough of that now, enough of the admin. Let's jump into the footy talk, and I welcome tonight's guest, Jordan. Welcome to the show, Jordan.
Thank you so much, Shane. I really appreciate you having me on the show, and I'm looking forward to having a chat.
No worries. Thank you for coming on. And for those of you listening who aren't familiar with who Jordan is exactly, well, I don't know if you've noticed something this year, but there's a loud sound coming from behind the goals at most Suns games, especially the away games, and that is the sound of a drum, and the person beating that drum is my guest, Jordan. So let's start by telling us a bit about the drum, and what was the inspiration that started you taking that to games and cheering up a storm?
Yeah, absolutely, Shane. So, I guess, first of all, my inspiration to start using the drum was mainly to drown out the loud and hostile crowds here in Victoria, and to show the players that, they have strong, passionate support here in Victoria. Because I did notice that in the years gone by, the players would start to drop their heads once the home crowd would roar after a goal had been kicked. I could see it was getting into their head, and they must have felt like they had no support because we're such a small fan base down here, and that it was demoralising. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to create some atmosphere and start bringing my drum to the games and get behind the players. And I just want to state as well, Shane, that, it's never really been about me, and I've never really wanted it to be about me, which is why I was kind of hesitant to come on the show. I just don't want people thinking I'm in it for myself, because my sole goal is to just create atmosphere at the games and support the players as loudly and passionately as we possibly can.
Yeah, I don't think that was ever in doubt. If anything, we wanted you on the show just because it seemed very inspirational what you were doing, and the support you were getting from people around you, encouraging them to cheer and get behind the boys is very... I was going to say inspirational again, but I can't keep saying that word. It's just very encouraging. Like you said, we get drowned out a lot. Even at Metricon Stadium, it always seems like the opposition's voices far outweigh our own. I don't know if that's a Queensland thing, but it's something that needs to change, and this is a great way to start it. I think we've had people in previous years use a horn and blow a bit of a trumpet, but the drum makes a lot more noise, and it's a beat that people can get behind. You've been to quite a few games this year. I noticed you were at the Adelaide game, and I think you came up to a Gold Coast game a few weeks later. And obviously, you being Victorian based, you go to all the Suns games down there as well. What's your experiences been with these hostile crowds and that drum?
Yeah, so I guess, in every crowd you do tend to get a few heroes, but overall I think that the, support for the drum has been overwhelming. We've had a bunch of players, so we've had Markov, we've had Will Powell, we've had Isaac Rankin, we've had Noah Anderson all comment on the drum, and that they're loving hearing it while they're playing out on the field. And so I think there's definitely support for it, and I think that the players do appreciate hearing it. Because in Victoria the crowds can get very loud and hostile. But obviously, the Collingwood game was absolutely fantastic. In terms of the noise we created and the Bronx cheer we created at the end of the game too. That was a lot of fun. So, the drum helps, create the atmosphere. It encourages the fans to, get out of their seats and lift their voices. And in terms of hostility, though, I would say not a lot, to be honest. Although in Adelaide, it was quite funny when I took it, obviously for the Good Friday game. At the end of the game, I did actually have a toothless Adelaide fan work his way to the front of the bay, which is where I was sitting, and he did attempt to steal my drum and snatch it out of my hands. However, the security guard there was absolutely fantastic. He was really looking out for us the entire game, and ended up putting that guy in a headlock and marching him up the stairs, and he was taken out. So anytime there has been trouble per se, it's been, I guess we've been really well looked after, and I think that is because we are a smaller fan base as well. The security guards really do their best to ensure our safety. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. We had one of the Adelaide supporters on the show. I think it was after that game, and he was telling us a lot about. Is Chris? I can't remember his last name. I'm sorry, Chris, if you're listening. He was telling us about the hostile crowd that you had to deal with there, and how, as supporters, you all as a group bonded together and sort of teamed up to support each other, and they even walked you back to your car to ensure that you got there safely. That must have felt pretty special with a bunch of people that you don't necessarily know extremely well, just all getting around you and helping you with this challenge.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's one thing that I absolutely love about, the Suns fan base, our fan base, is that, and I think that there's that real mateship and camaraderie between us all. And I think largely that is due to the fact that we aren't the biggest fan base and we do have each other's backs. But, they walked me out of the ground, and I actually was on my way to the Uber as well. And I had a few more issues on the way through there because the park is quite dimly lit. I don't know if you've been to Adelaide Oval, but after the game, where the stadium is, when you walk maybe 50 metres out of the ground straight through that parkland, it's quite dark. And I did have a few issues on the way to the Uber, but luckily the traffic control people that were on the corner of the cathedral were helpful as well, and kind of, helped me from that point get to my Uber. So, but absolutely, our fans are fantastic, and honestly, I'm just loving the growing support for us, especially in Victoria. I really feel like, obviously not last year because of COVID, but this year in particular, there's definitely a lot of new faces and, people that are just really passionate about supporting as loud as they can. So it's really making a big difference.
And how was the contrast coming up to Queensland and supporting the Suns with the drum at Metricon Stadium? I heard that they actually tried to take the drum away from you at one point.
Yeah, funnily enough, the only trouble I've had getting it into games so far this year was at Metricon Stadium, and that was against the Swans this year. Even though I obviously have the AFL approval and club approval to use it, and it is a shame because all I'm wanting to do is create some atmosphere for the players and the fans at the game. But I had some macho bloke in a suit come down and tell me not to use it, and then that I must cloak it at the quarter-time break. But luckily enough, common sense prevailed when the club intervened when I reached out to them, and they helped me out. So I was able to use it for the rest of the game. So if you guys were wondering why there was no drum in that first quarter against the Swans, that was why.
So you mentioned there you've got AFL and club approval. Was that is there like an official channel you had to go through to get that?
Yes, you have to get it through the AFL operations unit, and then it actually changed this year to the integrity and security unit. So that's what I had Josh from the club as well help me obtain. So that's the approval process for it.
Oh, fantastic. It's good to know that the Suns are actually behind you as well, supporting you with that, because it would be a real shame if they weren't. So how have you gone with the regular Suns members you're sitting there with? Have you sort of created a Sun Screamer section there wherever you guys are sitting each week?
In Victoria?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Sunscreamers in Victoria have always been around, and Gavin does a fantastic job. If you're listening, Gavin, really appreciate you and all you do for the club, mate. So yeah, Gavin's been a part of it since inception, and yeah, no, we have kind of bonded and as a group and created, I guess, a real Sunscreamers atmosphere, which but that's the goal. It doesn't matter if there's 10 of us or 50 of us or 100 of us. All we want to do is just make sure that the players can feel the support, because that's what it's all about.
That's it. It's the same sort of level when you look at it at a more simplistic view at local level. You get around the other club members and the players and family members there, have a few drinks, help each other out and do what's right. And
absolutely,
you
yeah.
bring it to the big level with the AFL clubs. Limited access because of security reasons and other stuff like that. But it's good to know that you're building that support group and the friendships and relationships that come with a small football club, and you're building that up with the Gold Coast Suns. So what's your supporting history with the Suns? When did you become a member? How was that transition? Like, did you follow a team before that? And what's probably been your favourite moment?
Yeah, so I guess ever since the Suns came into the competition, I had a soft spot for them and followed them closely. They were my second team. It wasn't till around 2016 to 2017 when I started doing some voluntary work for the club that I decided to solely support them, and that was due to the fact that they gave me membership 1 year. And then I became invested and decided to keep renewing it each year, and the rest is history. And, it's definitely been one of the best decisions I've ever made. I love this club and I'm super passionate about it. And I honestly believe that the best is yet to come for us. In terms of my favourite moment, there's probably been a lot over the years. Obviously the iconic win over Port Adelaide to begin it all. But most recently I'd have to say that beating Collingwood at the MCG was just incredible. The passion from the fans behind the goals was honestly a sight to behold. And like I touched on before, getting that Gold Coast Bronx cheer started with a few others behind the goals was incredibly memorable. And obviously, hearing it echo throughout the MCG was unreal. And then obviously watching it back on TV, because I had a few people messaging me saying, oh, Jared Healy called it out. And then Gary Lyon threw in a comment saying, they've had a really tough time in terms of the Sun supporters, and, we deserve to be excited and celebrating such a momentous win. It was our fourth win at the MCG and first time beating Collingwood there. So that was quite incredible, to be honest. But my favourite player has always been, Alex Sexton. But right now I'd have to say it's Isaac Rankin, and that's purely because he's an excitement machine and has serious X factor, but also because he's such a genuine and down-to-earth bloke who really cares about the fans. Every time the boys play in Melbourne, he'll, spend about 5 minutes just talking to me before the game and having a chat. So I really, really appreciate that. And I remember before the Western Bulldogs game, I said to him, if they won, he'd have to give me his jersey. But obviously that didn't come to fruition, unfortunately, because we got pumped. But, he just makes you feel appreciated and valued. He's just a champion of the club, and, I love the passion that he has for the club too. It's very, very evident that he's incredibly invested. When I flew up, for the Sydney Swans game a few weeks back, he was facing the cheer squad and trying to pump everybody up to make noise. And then one of the most memorable things I've ever seen a player do in my entire life was after the siren, he ran up to the fence and gave these two little boys one of his boots each. And one of the little boys just broke down and started crying. And I thought to myself, wow, that's just such an incredible moment for that young lad. That's a moment he'll cherish for the rest of his life. And that's honestly how you build culture at a football club. He'll be a Suns man through and through. And I think that's largely due to the experience that Isaac's given him. So yeah, I hope that answers your questions.
Yeah, it does. Isaac Rankin, a fan favourite among many. He also cops a lot of criticism because of, I guess, the over attention he gets for being such a talented player, but also the gusto he plays with on field. He sometimes makes a few mistakes, but his enthusiasm and his energy is always there. And some might say the way that he tries to get the crowd involved is because he craves the big crowds and the attention. But as you've just said, I think it's more evident that he cares about the club so much that he wants to get people and bring them up with him.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Like that, yeah. Okay, so we're keeping in touch as we're going for the Nick Holman tribunal, which is currently happening. I'll bring updates as they come, if they come while we're on the air, but the way it's going, it's pretty slow. Lockie Plowman's just been offered a 2-game suspension to be upheld. So they're still arguing that, and I believe Holman is... I believe the Marlon Pickett trial is next, and then Holman. So this could be going all night. Let's talk about the game versus Geelong. So you were there. It was a very hostile crowd from what we saw on TV, and for first-hand, you witnessing it yourself. Gold Coast Suns went down to Geelong by 34 points, 8 goals 9.57 to 14 goals 7.91. Not too bad, 34 points, considering the average losing margin at Geelong is 78 points for the Suns. And we've experienced quite a few floggings there, so 34 points isn't too bad. It even almost looked like the Suns could win that game at one point. They had more scoring shots than Geelong, but were just inaccurate and weren't able to convert until the final quarter when Geelong just took it up another gear and ran over the Suns. Tuke Miller, 30 disposals, 7 clearances at 76% efficiency, 6 score involvements, 15 contested possessions, and 430 metres gained. We certainly lacked him last week against the Lions, and he came out and dominated this game against Geelong as well. He's in great form. Hugh Greenwood, 18 disposals, 16 tackles, 7 clearances, 48 pressure acts. Something we haven't seen from Greenwood for a while. He seemed to have dropped off the last couple of games, but he's back with his contested footy and 12 contested possessions. Zach Smith entered into the side. We've gone a number of weeks now without a ruckman. He had 22 hit-outs, 8 to advantage, 9 disposals, 88% efficiency, and 1 goal. And Will Powell, 20 disposals, 75% efficiency, 6 marks, and 11 intercepts. They were the standout players. Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Jordan?
Well, yeah, I mean, honestly, I was quite proud of the effort we put in. We just lacked a bit of polish in some areas, but I think, we walked away feeling like they were competitive, and that's all we wanted to see. Like you said, we didn't want to see another 78-point flogging, and we didn't get that. So we were quite happy with the effort the players put in, but there was definitely some lapses in certain quarters. I think it might have been the second or third quarter where there just wasn't much going on. We couldn't get the ball forward. A few kicks in hope, bombing the ball forward, not really thinking about the contest, kicking to 2-on-1s or 3-on-1s and silly stuff like that. But overall, like you said, it was a fantastic result. And we definitely we're happy. It's definitely an honourable loss. And I know, we don't like to throw that word around a lot, but it was an honourable loss on this occasion. Yeah. They're a tough team to beat down there. We've never done it. So
it was. The pressure rating was fantastic for the Suns, and we all know that's an indicator of how well they're going. That was up over 200 during the third quarter. The big change with the gameplay this week was the ruck work. Over the last 3 weeks without Zach Smith, we averaged 15 hit-outs a game, and 5.6 of those were to advantage. This game with Zach Smith, we had 30 hitouts and 13 of those were to advantage. So it's definitely had an impact, but then if you look a bit closer to it, there wasn't much of a change in the clearance numbers compared to what we've had over the last 3 weeks. So it brings the question, does a ruckman make a huge difference? Do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, yeah, to be completely honest, in terms of, Zach Smith's form in the VFL, from watching him the past few weeks, I wasn't overly impressed, but I will say this. I was impressed with how he went about the game in Geelong, and I feel like, obviously being an ex-Geelong player might have helped him in terms of his positioning and things like that, because obviously he would have had a lot of experience against blitz halves and, a few others. So I really do think that from that regard, it might have made a slight difference in terms of whether a ruckman was a good thing to bring in. But the reality is we can't keep playing games without a ruckman because, it is such a vital part of the game. We want to get that clean ball and the clean clearances, and that's part of it. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. I think I read an article during the week or last week that it's time for Caleb Graham to go back to working as a defender. That's where he plays his best footy, and we're probably hampering his development if we keep trying to play him in the ruck. So I see the value there in Zach Smith. And now that Zach Smith has had a game under his belt, he can only get better. And we'll start to see our midfielders learn where to rove to make the most of his when he does get advantage in the ruck. What didn't work for the game was unfortunately our kicking efficiency. It was at 66% compared to Geelong's 75%. And we missed 3 easy shots at goal in the second quarter alone that could have squared things up at half time. And we just couldn't get our hands on the ball either. So when we did get the opportunities to hurt Geelong, we weren't taking them. At least we saw the effort compared to the week before, but it's certainly something the Suns need to pick up on is their kicking efficiency. And besides that, I don't have anything else negative or critical to say. Do you have anything critical to point out regarding that game?
Not really, to be completely honest. I think the only negative was, the behaviour of the Geelong fans towards us. But so
what happened there? You guys obviously. Everyone knows Geelong is a pretty hostile environment for away teams.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely hostile.
On the TV footage, it didn't look like there was too many Suns fans around you, so it seemed like there was only a handful of you guys there, and they certainly let you guys know about it.
Oh, absolutely. We would have been lucky to maybe have 20 fans all up behind the goals, but, to our credit, we, kept supporting loud and proud, even though we're being heckled and abused and, spat on. And I guess the thing that hurt the most was seeing a mother and child. Well, the child was in tears and they had to actually leave the game because they were being harassed that badly by their fans. And I honestly think the issue is that their fans think they're inferior and can't comprehend the fact that, there are other fans from other teams who are supporting their club in their stadium. So, and I think could be that sense of entitlement that they've got their own stadium and whatnot, but sheesh, I tell you what, it's definitely not a pleasant experience or an enjoyable experience to watch football at GMHBA. And unfortunately, there's actually a wide number of Suns fans who refuse to go to that stadium because of bad experiences they've had. But we can't, let those experiences, deter us from going to the footy and supporting our team because we have every right to be there, and it's just a shame that people are that put off going to the football there. So, we definitely weren't impressed, and we made the best of it, though. That's the thing. We made the best of it.
Yeah, it's a shame that poor behaviour is around at football games. It's been stamped out, I think, quite a bit up here at Metricon. It used to be pretty nasty, but pretty much over the last 10 years, people pretty quickly learned, what is antisocial behaviour, and they need to be respectful of others. It's a shame some of the smaller venues around Australia can't learn from that. But the players still have to go there, unfortunately. So unless it's a final, because we all know Geelong will never play a home final.
No.
That's my little dig. Let's move on. So another article I read during the week was it's time to see the Suns sort of change the way they attack things this season, with the finals being a very unlikely scenario now. What can the Suns do to change and learn for 2022? We've seen Jai Farah come in and play a rebounding defender and be really intuitive and useful down back when he was originally a forward. What about changes like Lukosius to centre-half forward, where he was recruited initially, or maybe move Rankin and Ainsworth into the midfield for more minutes in there to get them involved in the games? Because that's one of the criticisms with those two players, is they don't get enough possession or have enough impact in the games. What do you think about those ones? And are there any other position changes or strategies the Suns could do to change things up and improve?
Yeah, so Lukosius to centre-half forward. I honestly believe he plays his best footy down back, and I think that, his polish with the ball would be sorely, sorely missed if we did move him forward. I know in the past couple of weeks they did try moving him forward, and I think that obviously his impact on the game just wasn't as good. So I like him down back, I do. But I guess at the end of the day as well, it should be where he's wanting to play his football too, where he thinks he's most impactful too. So I hope that the coaching staff are getting his input on that one. In terms of Rankin and Ainsworth into the midfield, I think Ainsworth 100% should be definitely getting more midfield minutes. I'm not sure what his tank's like to run out a game in the midfield though, but he's obviously quite a solid big boy, so I think he'd definitely do quite well in there. Rankin, yeah, quite possibly. He's got the pace, he's got the speed, he's able to break tackles, so I think that it's definitely worth having a go. I mean, there's not many. There are a lot of positions that are obviously set, but I think there are some where you can kind of move the magnets around the board and see what's going to work and what's not going to work.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on the... Sorry, I don't agree with you on the Lukosius thing at half-back. I think, yes, he's very valuable for the Suns down there, but I think we've got enough talent and enough options out of the back line that we could utilise Lukosius further up the ground. Our current back six is doing quite well. Jai Farah is to come back into the side. Jack Bowes is to come back into that side. They all play defence. We've got Connor Buderick that will come back in there next year after he recovers from his ACL. And another player that we've all been wondering about, and I feel like he's only just starting to hit his straps, is Jez McLennan. So the Suns went down to Southport on the weekend in the VFL, but Jez was one of the shining lights in that game. He had 21 disposals, 9 marks, and was dominant in defence, getting the ball out, doing his job defending, but also finding options to get the ball, intercept and get out of that back line. So if we get Jez McLennan in there, that's another option. And then you could also move players like Lockie Weller or even maybe Jeremy Sharp if we can train him to be a bit more defensive. And then you've got Brendan Ellis and Rory Atkins that could both play off half-back. There's just a lot of options in that back line and the half-back line that we don't need to use Lukosius down there. And I think if Lukosius was to provide a target, maybe get a bit of meat on the bones, he could certainly be a lead-up centre-half forward and use his kicking skills to King's advantage.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's some good points you make. I've noticed with Lukosius, I think he is such a versatile and fantastic player. But with watching him, the one thing I've noticed he struggles with is his goal kicking and his accuracy with that. So if he could work on that, I think he'd definitely be dangerous up forward. But you're right though, his pinpoint precision and his field kicking is just sensational. Definitely the best in the game.
Yeah, if he could use that more to assist players like Ben King, be able to get more marks, because let's face it, King's getting double teamed these days with being the only dominant forward down there. And shout out to Ben King as well. If you're listening, jump on the AFL website and look for the Goal of the Year option, because Ben King is nominated for Goal of the Year this week with his terrific kick over the top of his head. So one of those goals that you used to try a lot when you were a kid, just try and be clever and kick the ball over your head. He managed to do it successfully in a elite level game.
That was unreal to see live.
It was unreal. Yeah. The other question we've got about the game is posed by Jared Healy during the commentary for the Geelong game. He said that the Suns need 4 to 5 200-plus game experienced players. Now, do you feel this is the case? Personally, I think 4 to 5 games is 4 to 5 players is a bit too much. I feel like we've got a lot of talent in there, especially young talent, and enough players are searching for opportunities in that side. We don't want to just be giving games to senior players from other clubs. It's not like we're going to be able to get people the quality of, say, like a Zach Merritt or someone like that to fill those voids. Like, we'd be looking at lower quality players. And they'd really only be there to set leadership standards and training standards, which is kind of what we've had over the last few years with George Holland-Smith and Jordan Murdoch. Do you feel like we do need that level of player, the 4 to 5 200-plus game experienced players, or we just need a few more experienced senior heads in that 22?
Yeah, well, I think what you have to look at is why is there the need for that potentially, that Jared Healy's saying, why do we need, the 4 to 5 200 game players? I mean, personally, I don't think we need that many. I feel like maybe 2 to 3 would be a sweet spot. But you got to also look at why we would be wanting to bring in those players, because like you touched on, we don't want to stunt the growth of our kids. We want to make sure we're still, investing in them and they're getting every chance to grow their game and their skills and, be contributors for the team. But then you've also got to look at, the leadership. And I think, outside of potentially Swallow and Miller, there's not a lot of leadership out there at the moment. And I think that's potentially why Jared Healy may have made that comment. But then also you've got to look at the salary cap as well. Who can we actually afford to bring in who's going to be at that 200 game mark and actually contribute to the team? Because like you said, the George Holland-Smiths and the Jordan Murdochs and the Michael Barlows and those types of players, if we're bringing these players in, we want to make sure that they're going to be active contributors and they're going to be an asset to the team. That's the key thing. And, for example, I'll touch on the forward line as well. Ben King, I think, he's obviously one of the greatest young forwards in the game at the moment. There's no question about that. But he does need some support. He needs another big tall that can kind of shoulder the load, like you said, to prevent the double teaming and things like that. But then it's like, well, who do you actually bring in who's going to be a genuine decent forward for us? And I've seen, names like Wiedemann being thrown around and things like that. But yeah, I guess we got to look at what the options long term are going to be and what they're going to be good for as well. Because I mean, it's hard to find a 200 game player as well that's still hitting their straps and they haven't hit that peak elite form and then they're kind of downsliding for the rest of their career. You want to try and make sure we're getting someone that's kind of just transcending up to that elite status, and we're going to ensure that we get the best football out of them as a player. And then also you've got to look at what players realistically can we enticed to come up to the Gold Coast.
Yeah, I mean, the level of player we know the club's been chasing but haven't been able to land over the last year or two has been players like Josh Kennedy from West Coast, an experienced key forward that's maybe got a year or two left. I mean, that would be a perfect foil for Ben King.
Oh, absolutely.
But
you get someone of his caliber in, or I even saw, not recently, but earlier in the year, someone saying Buddy Franklin. I mean, look, he kicked 5 goals against Freo on the weekend. He's still able to, contribute. So there's definitely some interesting veterans that could fill that void for sure.
And that's really what they'd be looking at, because they don't want to take away games from this youth, this young side. They don't want to put anyone offside, because realistically, if we are expected to bring in someone who's a veteran, 28 plus years old, if they're going to be best 22, they're going to be on some decent coin to relocate up to the Gold Coast, which means we're probably going to have to get rid of one of our young stars because we wouldn't be able to afford them, or even worse, we'd have to trade for that player. And the other side's going to want something of quality. If you want something good, you've got to give up something good these days. So I think the 4 to 5 is too extreme. I think the Suns have the right mix. We are going to lose a few veterans at the end of this year. We expect Jared Harbrow will hang up the boots and retire. And then we've also got Jordan Murdoch sitting there. And there is another player that isn't coming to mind. But yeah, we've got a couple of senior players. It's probably going to be retired or delisted at the end of the year. So there is definitely room to get some lower quality 200 plus experienced game players there, mainly to help with the VFL and development. I think there's still room for 1 or 2 experienced best 22 players if we can find them, and they'd have to be the right fit. Like we said, a key forward or someone down forward to help Ben King develop and help our forwards with their leading patterns. And I'd say the only other position you'd really want to consider would be someone off half-back, kind of like what Luke Hodge was for Brisbane, someone to help control the play, help set up defensively. Mind you, I think we've got enough talent down there doing that, with Sam Collins and Jack Bowes all providing leadership down there. All right, we've only got a few minutes left, and we haven't had anything come through regarding the Nick Holman trial. So let's just talk about that, what's going on there. It was a bit ridiculous, really, wasn't it? The tackle on Mitch Duncan didn't really seem out of the ordinary. It was a pretty basic tackle from viewing it on TV, and I'm sure it would have looked the same live.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I thought it was a very well executed tackle. I was honestly shocked to see the 2-match offering. I thought, the world's gone mad. What's wrong with Michael Christian and the tribunal and honestly, the umpiring, we won't touch on that, but honestly, it was well executed. I thought it was a perfect, rundown tackle. When you actually looked at Nick Holman's positioning too, his face was pressed into Mitch Duncan's side, and he was looking the other way as he tackled him and drove him into the ground. So there's no way you can say it was malicious when he wasn't even looking where Mitch Duncan's head was going. All he was focused on was stripping him of possession and winning that free kick. So I can't understand why that's worthy of 2 weeks. I mean, I understand, obviously, Mitch Duncan couldn't play out the game and was concussed as a result, but totally accidental. And, if it was a malicious intent, fair enough, but I just didn't see it.
Yeah, there's certainly, even in slow motion, there doesn't really look to be any sort of malicious intent to drive extra force onto Mitch Duncan. It was just an unfortunate accident. I'm sure Mitch Duncan will be fine, but he has to go through the concussion protocols, and it's something that we're very mindful of. Head-high contact and protecting the head. We all know what sort of problems that can cause for the body. But it's quite baffling why it was even sent to the why it was even offered a ban to begin with. And the Suns did the right thing to challenge it and go to the tribunal. The Marlon Pickett trial still going underway, so it still looks like Nick Holman's trial is going to come probably in another 20 to 30 minutes. So well after this show, but stay tuned to the GCSUNScast social media for any update on that. But it's just baffling that Michael Christian offered that. And if the worst case scenario happens and the ban is upheld, I think that's going to raise more doubts and questions about the game of football than anything, because people will be wondering what exactly is this sport that they love. Like, it's no longer the same thing.
Absolutely, and I guess the dangerous thing is it sets that precedent too, you know?
It does. Players aren't going to want to tackle if there's a risk that they can... tackling will end up just be grabbing and holding onto the person standing still. There's not going to be no force involved, no bringing the player to ground. There's just going to be no pressure in the game. Anyway, let's move on. Only a couple of minutes left, and we'll quickly discuss the game next week against Hawthorn. It's Doug Nicholls' Indigenous round. And the Suns are taking on Hawthorn 7:40 p.m. on Saturday at TIO Stadium, which is in Darwin. And it's going to be a wet, slippery game, we expect, after history. And let's just hope the Suns put in a better effort than what they did this time last year against Carlton.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's certainly, a winnable game. Given Hawthorn's recent form, but I'd love to just quickly say I'd love to see Joel Jeffrey make his debut up there. Be quite memorable for him to debut up there as well. And also a shout out to his family who came and had a photo with us behind the goals in Geelong.
Yeah, so Joel Jeffrey, a Darwin product picked up in the academy with the concessions, has been a shining light in the VFL side. He's been full of energy, full of X factor, kicked a couple of goals the other week, and he could be anything. It would be great to see him debut in a home game for him, and also provide a lot of highlights, hopefully, for the Suns. We haven't really had a great debut for the Suns since maybe Isaac Rankin last year. The other player that we hope to see back into the side is maybe Malcolm Roses Jr., another Darwin product. So bringing in a lot of speed and X factor seems like the way to go up in Darwin. And if we're going to have to pull players out in that case, we could be seeing Caleb Graham or Chris Burgess make way. It depends who they decide is going to be the backup ruckman. Another player that we expect to come back in is Jai Farah. He missed the game with a corky to his quad, but is expected to return in the back line. So it should be full of Indigenous boys to help support Sir Doug Nicholls' round. All right, Jordan, thank you very much for joining me, but that is all the time we've got for today.
No worries, Shane. Thank you so much for having me, mate. I've really enjoyed it.
No worries. I'd love to have you back on the show, but we'll figure out the schematics another time. Until next time, go Suns.